Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cincinnati Public Schools Board of Education Policy Committee. I am Mike Morosky, board member and policy committee chair, and we are joined by Ms. Bolton. If you'd introduce yourself.
Hi, Eve Bolton, board member.
Mr. Lindy.
Hi, Ben Lindy, board member.
Mr. Hoying.
Dan Hoying, I'm the lawyer for the school district.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. If you are here and you would like to sign up to speak later, you will need to send a request in the first 10 minutes of this meeting by clicking on the hand icon on your screen. Mac and iPad users are able to access the hand icon located on your device. Once the request has been granted by General Counsel Hoying, you will receive a notice on your screen. Click yes to go interactive. You do not want your after speaking, you'll briefly see the welcome screen again as you transition back to the live stream meeting. You will have 2 minutes to speak. Mr. Hoying will be our timekeeper. When the buzzer goes off, your time is up. And please note that we ask that you put in the chat your name, your affiliation to the district, with the district, and you have your video on when you're speaking, please. So that being said, we have a pretty big agenda that will be finished at 10 a.m., so we give people time to speak. So without any further ado, our very first agenda item, Ralph Earhart, did I say your last name correctly?
That is correct, Mike.
All right, Mr. Earhart. So you are here today on behalf of the Cincinnati Chamber Orchestra, which is awesome, requesting an alcohol waiver. So I'll just turn it over to you really quick.
Yes, I'm not going to take much time. We have been performing at the SCPA since from 2015 through 2019 with the Summer Music Festival. We've been providing wines service through a third-party vendor to our patrons. This year is a little different. We're planning currently for an outdoor version of our festival, but we're hoping that if the situation changes dramatically over the next 3-4 months, that we will be able to have a couple events at the SCPA in August. And so, as a backup or as an alternate route for planning this year, we would like to request the alcohol waiver again, as in previous years, excepting last year. In a nutshell.
Do any of the board members have questions for Mr. Earhart?
I have just a couple of questions. I'm sure hoping that August allows us to do what you would like to do best. I appreciate that. Obviously, it would have to be based upon whatever COVID protocols, like maybe reduced attendance. How many people, sir, do you usually have?
We average over close to 500 per event.
Okay.
Obviously, with the regulations in place right now, this number is greatly reduced, and that's one of the reasons we're also going to be outdoors. We're planning to be outdoors. For this summer right now, our replacement of the SCPA this summer right now is Seasonal Pavilion, and we're planning, socially distanced, 15% attendance of what we could possibly fit there. We have enough PPE to last us for a few months going through this. So I think we're all set for on that end. Yes, but we all hope that, because being outdoors has its own risks, that we will be able to maybe have 1 or 2 events indoors in the summer.
Great. And as I always ask, it's just about beer and wine, right? And
it's actually just wine, no beer.
Very classy.
Yes. It also, it has something to do with the permits you can get.
I hear you.
In that time space. So we would like to have both, but we can't. It's impossible with the permit situation, and we're not profiting from that at all. So actually, it's an investment for patrons.
Well, it's great, and we're so happy to have you as kind of part of a CPS family. And we know a number of your members also are private teachers for our kids as well.
Yes, yes,
So,
and
thank you.
Angela Powell Walker's on our board as well. So,
Well,
um,
I have to be careful with her. I'll tell you, she's a dynamo.
oh, she is.
Great. Ben, do you have anything for Mr. Earhart?
No, Mr. Earhart, this is my first alcohol waiver as a board member, so I appreciate you showing me the ropes on this.
Which is wild because they happen all the time, but I guess, yeah, because of COVID,
COVID.
yeah, it would be your first. So I have no questions, Mr. Earhart. I think it's great. So Dan,
Yep.
we can pass this on to the full board for approval. Awesome.
Will do. Thank you.
All right, good, sir. Nice chatting with you before the meeting. Have a good
Nice
one.
chatting with you. You have a good day and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye.
All right, great. So first order of business of the day is we got booze at the orchestra. You can feel good about that, right? Okay, that's a good way to start the day. Our next agenda item, I just wanted to put this on here in case there were questions from my colleagues. If there are not, then we're moving on. It's regarding the Circle Tail emotional support animals. I sent around a couple links and just wondered if there are any questions. If not, great. I'm going to be talking to Rhea Bender, the senior at Clark, soon, and maybe have some more info and kind of keep the conversation going, if nothing else. So, opportunity for questions. That's all. Nope. Okay, great. Number 3, board policies for the board versus the administration. This as well is on here because I'm going to just kind of keep it on here, if that's okay. I think it's good to keep on here. Again, if there are any questions or any additions or subtractions to the list that, as you may recall, when we got our work plan approved by the full board, this was also approved as being the list. Now, that doesn't mean it can't change. So I'm just curious if anybody questions, additions, subtractions to that list that we created.
I won't take but a minute, I hope, or maybe
Sure.
3.
Sure.
And I really appreciate you keeping this on. I do think there's a degree of it that is somewhat time sensitive as we kind of invent the new CPS, or at least we're talking about it and trying to figure it out, because I think some of this is possibly could influence some of that decision making and some of that visioning. So I did the homework kind of that I assigned to myself, and I did from the first list, which deals about the work. I took off 1220 and 1310 and 1430.01 just because I felt that they were not part of the perpetual work, or consistent work, but they were like employment of the superintendent and employment of the treasurer. That's a temporary thing that we do, so it doesn't necessarily influence our daily work or our benchmarking. And I also took off FMLA, even though that's so crucial. Again, that's something that we have to do it. We want to do it. It says something about us, but it's not our work. So I did take off of that list those few things. I did think, and this is minute 2 on this one, Dan and Stephanie may have to, based upon Dan's rather broad interpretation of sunshine laws and what have you, and our current legal whatever we're in, Stephanie and Dan may have to review our bylaws. Because looking at our bylaws, there's a lot of stuff where we talk to each other. And maybe I'm over-interpreting what has been said, but I think it might be interesting as some sort of action item along the way that some of us are acting within our bylaws, I believe, and I think we may be stepping over the line. So I would just like to suggest that might be a possibility. And that's the bylaw part of the list. The other a couple of other comments real quick, the minute 3, hopefully. To Ben's issue about the superintendent evaluation, we're within whatever we've written, but this is kind of interesting, Ben, to your point. The treasurer is also supposed to have something done by the academic year start. And the reality is part of it is that there's this academic year, but there's also this fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
So we may want to kind of look at that based upon your prodding about the time frame for the superintendent. We may want to look at the time frame for the treasurer as well. I mean, obviously they have to be interrelated. There has to be a confluence between the treasurer and the superintendent, and August kind of captures both in its own way. But I mean, that just might be something to look at, having now read that one too. And then
I really like that.
think about that if you would, because I think that might be again something that could be an improvement. And I also didn't realize how important the parent and family engagement for federal programs is. I never realized how giant that is, and I think I voted on it and I didn't realize. And it's so giant that we might want to think more about that as pertaining to almost everything we do. Because I have sensed in the last several years that there's an attempt to bring the community back into the district. I mean, most urban districts are basically administration and the teachers union, unlike the suburban districts and even rural districts, where the community has a lot more to say about what goes on than. And I know, Mike, you know this has been a theme at least for the 4 years that you've been on, and preceding that. I mean, that's always been a focus for, Vanessa White and Carolyn and whomever. But that number is 226101. It's huge. Didn't know about it. Real quick, wanted to ask Dan about 2412, which is homebound instruction. And it refers to kids that can't attend school. And I didn't know where else we have digital as a digital learning, but it seems like somehow part of that might fit there if we expand our concept of digital, which it sounds like we're going to try to do. So I just for Dan's review and Stephanie to check out. And I think we do need to all read the one about unauthorized work stoppage because of negotiations, and that's 3531. There seems to be something wrong with the one about grading. It's like ancient, and it does not reflect. I don't think anything that we've put twice in the CFT contract. It actually, stuff about reporting grades actually appears the same paragraph twice in the CFT contract. So there was a mistake there, but and it talks about grading professional staff, so there might even be some verbiage that's wrong in that one. But and then 7560, I know we're not allowed to have charters anymore because we failed so miserably at the one that was sharing space with Aiken, but it does still provide us the opportunity to have our own kind of sponsored charter schools. That just might be an interesting discussion for us. Of course, I'm totally opposed, but I know that other members are not that opposed. And to Mike's efforts, real quickly on good food purchasing, those 5 things that are part of the criteria in 8525, part of that are really, I mean, some of those, that's a good standard by which to judge a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just something in the future as we look. And then this is also to Stephanie and Dan, there's 9500 and 9555 and 9700. Those are all really long policies. And it just seems like, I don't know why we have 3 of them. One's titled Partnership with Businesses, one's organizations, and one is something else I can't remember. But it seems like some of that could be taken and maybe made into one policy instead of three really long ones. I take it back, only one that I know for sure is super long. But that was just me looking at trying to make the list less, or I didn't even get obviously into the next grouping of them that I think are more philosophical, which are probably more important to our new CPS than the first group. But I know Mike and I had said we do not want to sit through another retreat where people are asking what it is we're supposed to be doing. It's pretty clear what we're supposed to be doing.
Uh-huh. Great.
So that's it.
I appreciate that, Eve. I have a couple things too on this one. I'm going to kick it over to Ben. No,
Mike,
okay.
I'm good. Please go ahead.
I just want to echo the piece about grading. Perhaps, a proverbial shot in the arm there again, especially as we move forward. The finance piece under philosophy, the finance of all the policies, I think it'd be interesting to look at all of them. Especially as we move forward, and maybe Dan, I don't know when we did 6,000 last on the rotation, but I'm thinking maybe we bump that up and kind of go hard at 6,000. And there are a few there too, Eve, that I think, like you were mentioning about a couple that, I don't know, they could be combined or excised or shortened or just more, I don't know, more direct, because there's a lot in there. One other thing that I shared in common with Eve, so that was a new thing. So 6,000, maybe we bump those up and tackle those. I had the same reaction to 2261.01. That policy is like, it could be the community engagement policy. It's insanely robust. And for good reason. Most of our schools are title schools, and that's essentially what that policy is. You talk about federal program, you're talking about title for the most part. So that's, what it looks at, but it is intense. And I don't know that we do it, at least with fidelity. I know, I don't think so 2260.01 is one. I may give some homework that everybody, if they haven't dug into that, kind of fine-tooth comb that. I know I will, because it's good too. That's the other thing I need to mention. So whoever did that, whoever passed that and was a part of it is great. But it's something to look at, and maybe even something is like a guide. And if you haven't read it in a while, it says we're going to do a lot. So that's all I had. Okay.
Cool.
Can I ask a question there?
Yes.
This might be a question for Dan, but if let's say someone were to find out, or like a student, teacher, family member, somebody were to want to make the argument that the board isn't following its own policy, do they have any legal recourse? Like, is there a cause of action? Like the board's not following its own policy, so we're going to sue to force them to follow their own policy? Or is there any enforcement around that?
I think in some cases there could be. If a parent or other stakeholder relied to their detriment on a policy that the board passed, there's the potential for a cause of action. The more likely result is that the board policies are there to communicate the board's direction to its employees and staff at the district. And so if employees of the district are failing to follow the board's policies, that employees can be held accountable for that in various ways. That answer your question?
I was trying to say, so I think so, but so is it basically then like it could be grounds for administrative action?
I think it depends on the policy. So again, like a good example is the bidding policy that you that is on our agenda today. So if a bidder to the district said, hey, I relied in good faith on that this was the manner in which bids would be evaluated. And I was not awarded the work because, you gave it to Stephanie Scott's cousin instead. Because
she's very good, Stephanie Scott's cousin.
More likely, though, yes, it's the manner of the board holding its employees and administration accountable.
That's great. I appreciate that, Dan. And I apologize if there's a weird delay on my end. Are you guys hearing me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I just want to add to what Dan said. So yes, and also that means it's incumbent upon us to communicate what these policies are. And in the past couple years, I feel like we have done a much better job of that. I know the superintendent put a priority on that right when she got here, i.e. creating procedures and communicating. And that was right before I got on the board. But then when I got on the board, my first year in policy, we made sure that we were communicating. And so you'll notice that the entire staff gets an email when we update a policy now that says this policy was updated. Now, we can't ensure everybody reads all of these, but again, to Dan's point then, it's the onus is really on us to then communicate it so people know. So, and I have to say, and you all know I'd be the first to say if we weren't, I do think we're doing a pretty good job as far as policy goes, which can be a fairly heady concept at times. So.
Yeah, and just for a little historical perspective too, even in one of our policies, it says that there's supposed to be guidelines, administrative guidelines and procedures, and it's supposed to be known by the board what those might be. And I will tell you, the first 10 years I was on the board, maybe a little bit longer, about 10 years, I never saw a guideline. Mm-hmm. We weren't publishing them. It was an internal document. Very frankly, a lot of our policies had no guidelines. Because again, the hope was this all could be managed by the administration and try to keep CFT in line or participatory in the board. Whenever the board's not involved, that's good because that's great. But if the board is conscientiously kept out of it, that's bad. So I think there's been a lot of improvement. And I do think that's one of the reasons to try to separate philosophically what is board work and board policy, so to speak, about what the board's supposed to be doing versus what Dan said is us giving direction to the superintendent for the employees to carry out whatever these policies might be. So I appreciate that.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Moving right along then, unless there's anything else. Okay. So this is Ms. Bolton. I'll turn it over to you for the Ohio Principal Evaluation System, or OPES.
Great. As we all know, it used to fall to student achievement to worry about the teacher's evaluation. I don't ever recall it falling to student achievement and then policy about the principal evaluations. But 2 years or so ago, indeed, because we had to have a policy about our teacher evaluation, it fell to policy instead of student achievement. Plus, we've reduced a lot of the responsibilities at student achievement that it once had. It had too many. So we know we passed the OTES as a policy for this past year, and we're in OTES 2.0 this year and were last year as well. Just this month, the Education Standards Board did pass the last draft that goes to the State Board of Education for OPES. OPES is the Ohio Principal Evaluation System. OPES, and both OTES and OPES represent probably almost 5 years of work statewide, and it generally falls to Education Standards Board. The point is, I think we have to make a determination, and I said this at the board meeting, and with the I guess, of the administration or the knowledge of the administration or whatever the superintendent may think about it, wanted to know if as soon as the state board passes it, which we think they will do in April, we have an opportunity to participate in the first year of OPES. That has to be an administrative decision for sure. But I wanted to know if we could, I think it will require a policy about OPES. The key part about OPES is that it totally parallels OTES, meaning the principal evaluation and the teacher evaluation are very much in the same kind of time frame, same values, same measurements, same rubric kind of thing. So they do match. And I think it helps us measure ourselves against other districts as well if we have something that is part of what the state is doing, especially if it's required. And I think that's why we still want to keep parts of the superintendent and parts of the treasurer's evaluations, at least parts, aligned to the state. Because the more we can do that, which represents a lot more work statewide and nationally than what we can do ourselves individually or here in our own chauvinistic way, I think that's helpful. I think it also says we're holding sort of the superintendent, the treasurer, our teachers, and our principals to what would be state standards as well. So we have to figure out if OPES, if the administration wants to do it as early as this coming year, Cincinnati's allowed to because they already did OTES. And we have to decide if we need a policy about OPES. I think we do. And then also this alignment with the state, I think will also help us in negotiations because at least it gives us a framework from which to measure ourselves. So that would be all I have to say about it, but we'd probably be needing to take action. The administration has to figure that out pretty soon. As soon as the state board passes it, we can volunteer to do it. And as soon as the state board passes it, we could start to create the policy that's required. That's it.
Great. I only have one question, and the question is, when the state board passes it, because I think they will, the most exciting thing about it to me is that the two OPES and OTES are aligned, and on a Venn diagram, their middle section is larger maybe than it has been in the past. So, but my question is, when they pass it, is it going to come with accompanying language similar to OTES, or are we going to have to reinvent the wheel?
I think what will happen is sort of what happened with OTES, which was, I think, Dan gathered a couple of people that are familiar with what is currently in the CFT contract. You'll probably have to gather the same sorts of folks that, at least as long as the CAS contract is in its current state, and they do the comparison. But there is boilerplate for OPES like there is boilerplate for OTES. There are things that are mandated that have to happen, and then there are things also that have local discretion. And that local discretion is I think, part of the exciting part. So I think all that's the same. The model looks very similar. And they've done a tremendous amount, even more so than I think they did for OTES, because they were able to, getting input and reaction around the state from all kinds of principals and other administrators and community.
Do we know, with OTES, we had a lot of teacher support, and there was that, crew of teachers and principals that were supportive of it. Do we know if we have a similar interest right now for OPES? Just curious for my own edit. Is there any?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that, Kendra was, gave, I think, apparently among the most influential testimony to the state board about the OTES 2.0. And I know she followed it. And indeed, at the Education Standards Board, there's 30 people. There's one person representing school boards. That would be me. But there's a number of administrators. So BASA and all those folks have representatives around the table as well. But for local, I don't know if we've had any local representation or not.
Yeah. Great. Well, I mean, and then I'll kick it to Lee. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I'll just add that I'm aware Sarah Brody and Susan Bunty are following this. They advise they couldn't be here today, but they advise that ODE has trainers available for those school districts that want to be early adopters next year, and they confirmed, as Ms. Bolton did, that it will be required in 2022-23.
Okay. And do you have any indication? And if not, that's great. This will be an assignment. If not, do you have any indication if the administration, of Ms. Bolton's point, is amenable to this, or?
I'll take it as an assignment. I did not get either direction there.
Cool. Well, then once we figure that out, we can start getting the wheels turning so that we're ahead of it. Unlike with OTES, which mea culpa, that was my bad.
Yeah.
Mr. Lindy, do you have anything on OPES?
Thanks, Mike. I did, but Dan actually just answered it. I wasn't sure if this was always elective or would be required at some point. And I think what Dan said made great sense.
Cool. Great. Well, Mr. Lindy, while you're on the hot seat, unless Ms. Bolton, you feel good?
I feel good.
Good. All right. Policy 7100, facilities planning. So the policy exists, facilities planning. I know, Mr. Lindy, you sent some documents to Mr. Hoying that we all received that I have read. So I will turn it over to you to let you lead this part of the conversation.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. I really am primarily just eager to hear from folks in the administration. I think to me, it seems like there are a lot of kind of intuitive reasons that some responsible bidder language seems and feels like a good thing. I'm also not an expert, and so I wanted to share with you some examples of things that other entities in Cincinnati have done and get a sense of what some of the pros and cons look like for us in CPS. I'll share I have like an incoming perspective that this would be a good thing for us to do, but I also want to learn more from people who have more experience with this than I do. So I'm eager to hear what people have to share.
Well, I can jump in if that makes sense. And I'm going to turn my camera on. I'm going to turn I'm going to share my screen because I think that'll be smoother. Okay, so the first document I want to put up is just this discussion as the committee wishes to board policy 7100, facilities planning. One thing I wanted to point out, let me see if I can make this larger. One thing I wanted to point out, I believe we've made the other changes that the board has requested. So Board Member Bolton requested at the last meeting that we include language that says superior school buildings / learning centers. So we've added that language throughout. And then language that was proposed by Board Member Lindy is at the bottom here, where not otherwise prohibited by law, every bid must disclose the following. Failure to do so may constitute evidence that it is not the lowest bid. And then we've got percentage of employees living in the CPS catchment area or geographic area, whether the bidder provides or contributes to healthcare plans, and whether the bidder contributes to an employee pension or retirement system. Finally, whether the bidder has maintained or participated in an apprenticeship program. Robin Brandon, facilities director, and Trina Levens, the purchasing director, were not able to be here this morning, but I've shared this language with both of them. I think from an information gathering perspective, neither Trina nor Robin had any concerns about that language. I will say Robin mentioned that the last part D, whether the bidder has maintained or participated in an apprenticeship program, is probably specific to a union contractor. And so in order to expand that, you may want to ask something along the lines of whether the bidder has maintained or participated in an apprenticeship or other training programs. But that was her only feedback. And again, from a sort of information gathering process during the bid, there was no real concern there. Board Member Bolton also asked me to share a little bit about what the district has already in place, and so I'll bring that up as well. The district has two policies, I think, that are relevant. One is the business policy, and that's 6320. And then immediately following that is 6320.01, which is the district's determination of lowest responsible bidder. And so, again, some of this information, again, not exactly in the way I think board member Ben Lindy proposed, but is sort of requested as a part of our bid collection process, RFP process, et cetera. So, including, the experience, training, and skill of the bidder's workforce, the bidder's diversity, and there's specifically a requirement that the bidder disclose the percentage of its workforce that live within the standard metropolitan statistical area. That is, again, our geographic area. There's a preference for contractor. We have a sort of local hire initiative that gives a preference to contractors who are within our local region and hire workers, including our parents and taxpayers in our local region. We've got requirements that bidders maintain the same non-discrimination rules that we do. And then also some goals in terms of, hiring minority and women on workforces. And then as well, we've got, we don't specifically call out training programs except for our own, which is the Woodward Career Technical Program. And we give preference to contractors who partner with Woodward. Again, requirements that bidders are complying with workers' comp, unemployment, and all other regulations. The only other thing I'd add to this discussion is if you haven't seen it already, it's worth taking a look at the district's Doing Business with CPS webpage. And I think that should be up on your screen as well now, I'm hoping.
Yep.
Good. So within this page, there are obviously our current bids that are out for bid, but then a lot of information for suppliers and vendors on requirements. So obviously all the board policies and resolutions are included on that page. And if there's changes that the board contemplates or makes to our policies, they'll be updated here as well. Description of our minority inclusion programs. And then just, again, all of the supplier registration information and what's required of vendors and suppliers who are doing business with CPS. I think it's slow because I'm on blue jeans here. But in any event, I would recommend, if you haven't seen that as well, to take a look at the page that describes the requirements for doing business with CPS. Glad to answer any questions.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah,
Ben?
Mike, thanks. So Dan, thanks for pointing out, and Eve, thank you for pointing this out too. Like there were the current bidder requirements that are on the policies. If you look at what was in the paragraph that Dan had that came from me, and think about what's in 6320.1, I don't want to suggest anything that's just duplicative. Like if it's already covered, I think it's already covered. My hypothesis was there was some content in what I suggested that was new, but I'm not sure that's right. And so that's what I wanted to ask about. Like if we added the paragraph I was suggesting, would there be meaningful new content or not so much?
If you're asking me, I think yes. I would not necessarily recommend including it in the board policy I would include your new language if adopted in some of the responsible bidder paragraphs and business policies. I think it probably makes more sense there than it does in the policy that the board was considering, which is more general, I think. I think the piece about whether the contractor contributes to a healthcare plan and or retirement plan is new. And again, from, I think, both Robin's perspective and Trina's in the purchasing department, no real concerns from them or about asking bidders about that question or about those subjects.
I think, and then my other question was, procedurally, where we're currently working on the facilities policy and not on the other one, but is there a reason that we couldn't modify that policy now? Like, because I hate if it's good if it's good for the world and for the universe, I'd hate to have to just arbitrarily wait for another year and a half or whatever until it comes up. Could we go ahead and suggest that modification, assuming people were interested in it? But could we do it sooner rather than later?
There's no procedural reason you could not.
Yeah.
Great. Well, then I'll just, I want to, oh, sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
You go ahead, Ben, finish. I'm sorry.
I don't want to hog all the airtime. I was just going to say, from my perspective, these felt like good things to add. Just from my perspective, what I'm hearing from the administration is not seeing a real downside. So I'd love to advocate that we do this. But Eve may have a different perspective, or Mike may have a different perspective, and would love to hear more.
Ms. Bolton, and then I'll add my 2 cents.
Putting them all together, including what we were sent regarding the Archdiocese, which I found interesting, separating actual big construction versus renovation, and what have you. Just several comments. I think I don't have any aversion to including some reference to our responsible bidder policy in the policy that we're looking at now, and I do think we ought to review the current lowest responsible bidder policy. There, and let me explain why. There are parts of it, and I think I may be the only person old enough. I think maybe there's a few old folks on here to have lived through the facility's master plan. And with our new anti-racism policy, there are some references in the current responsible bidder list that, at least if you're reading Kende, would suggest some concerns. For example, how long have you been doing this? What are your management skills, and what have you? And actually, remembering some of the smaller contractors that we use, it's very difficult for them to do the healthcare and the retirement piece beyond maybe what law requires, or being able to prove it. It sometimes knocks the smaller contractor out. And remembering politically, too, as I recall, that the various chambers of commerce and the district had to help many of the people looking for business with the district to help them with their bonds, because it was an upfront cost and they didn't necessarily there are things in this, as and to Mike's credit, there are things in all of these policies that really cause us to think about what is elitist about what we're doing, or how are you lessening the pool of participation. So I think, to your point, I think I'd reference whatever is going to be the responsible bidder policy, but I do think we ought to move the responsible bidder policy up as it pertains to better things. I think also we have to ask ourselves, is it a union shop or not? And here's the exciting thing. I remember when we specifically added Woodward. And that's great, but right now, that really should be all of our career technical pathways. I mean, whether it's the ag group at Campbell, I mean, these kids, it's happening everywhere. So I think that would have to be expanded to be that. And we always forget what's that term? Passion? What is it that Dan? They have to be from our district or the what is it called?
Standard metropolitan. It's the standard metropolitan statistical area,
which really is Indiana, Kentucky, and other parts of Ohio. I mean, and I think too, the whole local piece should be strengthened. I really do. But no, I think this is a great discussion, and I think applying the anti-racism strategies and tactics would be a good way, would be a good lens to look at the current policy. I really do. And I do remember the problems that we had expanding. I don't even know, I know that we have a report in finance all the time for the diversified supplier office. Is that just our procurement office now? I mean, it's something we had to create as a result of not sharing the wealth, so to speak. There's some real good stuff in here. I'm glad Ben has brought it up.
I am too. I want to give anybody more comments before I kind of give my, sort of piece. Does anyone have?
Can I just respond to Eve, Mike?
Yeah, go for it, Mr. Lindy.
No, I just wanted to say I think the points you're bringing up make great sense. And I think what I hear you saying is like let's likely do these things. Let's also do them in the context of a broader review of all the responsible bidder pieces that likely have some real lessons learned from facilities master plan, and also have some new things we need to think about in light of the anti-racism policy. And I think that sounds great. I'd just like to volunteer to be helpful. Like if there are next steps for people to carry on this, I would be very happy to do that.
Great, and that's kind of where my head was at, was next steps. I don't have anything to add to what has already been said aside from next steps. And so I tend to agree that that final paragraph in 7100 belongs in a different policy than 7100. And it could be in, the bidder policy. And to Ben's point too, I don't think we need to wait until policies pop up again. So my question would be to the committee is there an appetite to go ahead and ask council to add that language to one of our bidder policies now, and then have a broader review with that in there, or what? I'm kind of looking for direction on that.
My preference would be that we just elevate it up the list to be reviewed together before we add any language yet. Unless they have some ideas, but I do think there are some things that we need to have real good discussion about before we even put council in a weird place proposing something.
I agree. What would the timing on that be?
Next meeting.
Oh, that's great. Sounds fantastic.
Yeah. So we have for Ms. Bruckner, we have our first agenda item for our next meeting, which will be these responsible bidder policies, which essentially are, and then this is where I'm going to look for help from Dan and Stephanie, are they, the two that you sent, are there more? So we know we have the two. We know we have this new language. Are there more that need to be included?
So let me back up just 1 second. So on 7100, which is the one that we were considering, as I understand, we're going to move forward with that, but pull the language that Board Member Lindy had proposed and propose that in some of the find a place for that within the responsible bidder policies. Right. And then, there are probably 4 or 5 within that section. And we can start the review of all of those. I to the extent I second the recommendation to look at those policies, even in the ones we references that are outdated. There's a reference to our owner-controlled insurance policy, which we used during the facilities master plan, but that's no longer in place. So those policies, I think, are ripe for some review.
Great. So whatever those policies are, then Ms. Bruckner, we'll put on the agenda. We'll review at our April meeting, and then we'll find a place for that good language, Mr. Lindy, that you provided us. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Great. Awesome.
Moving forward with 7100.
Yeah, without that paragraph at the end. Yep. We can put that in front of the.
Thank you.
Yep.
But Mike, could I?
Yep. Sorry.
Just I appreciate the changes, and I'm just I didn't know if that 7100 needed anything about accessibility to the campus. In the first line, just from that our campuses need to be, ADA kind of accessible or something. I didn't know if that was something to think about. superior school buildings, learning centers. That's great. Thank you so much for adding that, featuring maybe accessible campuses. I mean, that's one of the things I hear, not often, but occasionally, is that some of our campuses probably need not just it's not about being attractive, it's about being accessible.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, and and frankly, it came up a couple of weeks ago. So it was any thought on my part, but I just thought maybe that would be useful, especially since we're going to be emphasizing the outside, but also because we're community learning centers.
Would
I'm glad to add that.
Would it make sense to say superior and accessible? Is that what I mean? Just
yeah, I mean, and we do mention. I don't care where we put it. I just think that that's a good commitment.
I agree. I would recommend just adding superior and accessible school buildings, learning centers, and go from there, and just have it right at the beginning.
And even instructional materials are accessible. You know, that's the language piece and what have you.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, that makes sense. Good suggestion. Thanks, Ms. Bolton. All right. Any more comments? Good meeting so far. Any more comments? All right. Then we're going to move on, and we're going to go to our continued review to policies, and I'll kick it to Mr. Hoying. Let's go.
Okay, we'll go very quickly. Again, I'm going to take my hearing. We have, I think, 4 policies which have been reviewed. Well, we'll go through them. Some of them have been reviewed more recently than others. The first is our 7420 Hygienic Management. This relates to the cleanliness and sanitariness management of the schools. If I can put a plug in, I think our group does a terrific job on this, particularly Robin's group, the facilities group, but also supported by Cynthia Gbalnia in the environmental health and safety. Her role has become incredibly important this year. There's a specific reference to safety procedures relating to the handling and disposal of bodily waste and fluids. And I will say that it's a requirement of all district employees to take a bloodborne pathogens training program on safe schools. That's been our process for at least the last 4 or 5 years. And I think that's benefited our school district as well. So no recommendations, but this is the policy relating to cleanliness and sanitariness of the schools. Glad to answer any questions or take any recommendations.
Ms. Bolton?
Do we still have, I know we have somebody that does this, do we still have the right title, Director of Building Operations?
That to me is Robin Brandon's role. I believe she is Director of Facilities is her title. I'm glad to update that.
I think that'd be great to update that.
Got it.
And, you know, this too, that one paragraph about the disposal and what have you, it's good that it's all staff members because, you know, many of our teachers, instructors, and paras, not just our maintenance staff that does a lot of this stuff, but our teachers are in the business of doing this stuff as well.
That's right. Paraprofessionals.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good on that.
You're good from me.
Me too.
Okay, next policy to review is Board Policy 7430. This is our risk reduction program. School districts do not they don't follow or they're not covered by the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Safety and Health Act, as most private businesses are. So OSHA doesn't have a direct jurisdiction over school districts, but OSHA standards are essentially adopted by Ohio workers' comp and PERP. Cynthia would know what that acronym stands for, but it's not coming to me. But essentially, this is the policy that ensures the health and safety standards are followed with respect to employee safety. Again, I don't have any recommendations or updates, but wanted you to be aware of and have the opportunity to review our worker safety policy. Glad to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee?
Is it strong enough? I mean, I know we like it somewhat porous, but is under what we've just lived through, is this strong enough risk reduction?
So the language in the first paragraph, providing an environment free from hazards, is consistent with Ohio Revised Code, what that requires. Okay. I will say, in terms of the district's responsibility, again, I tend to think this is an area in which we excel. I'm not aware of any other school district in the state that has its own environmental health and safety expert. That tends to be a position that's held certainly at like a factory or other maybe a construction company, those kind of employers. But for a school district to have that level of professional on staff, I think is unusual, if not unique. So the policy, I think, speaks for itself, but in terms of what the district is doing to ensure worker safety, I mean, Cynthia, she coordinates all our sort of OSHA training, confined space training, lockout, tagout training, walking, working surfaces. She coordinates all of that for the trades and facilities employees that work for the district, and I think she does a pretty terrific job.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
And exactly for that reason, I think this policy and operations or whatever works both ways. Our policy does not reflect that we're wonderful about this or that we actually elevate it to that priority. And more particularly, you could have a new superintendent and decide we have to make cuts. And so we get rid of that position. I just think that I think we ought to call it out that we want somebody doing that, or the superintendent making sure there is somebody, or I just would like it to be stronger to reflect the excellence, sort of like the nutrition policy.
Sure.
It's something we are doing better than anybody else. Absolutely. Nutrition and safety and what have you. I just think maybe we could call it out a bit more. Unless we're happy.
No, with that in mind, I'm happy to add some oomph to it.
Good.
And bring it back
that's what I want. I like oomph.
You have formally been assigned oomph. And so we will shelve that and bring it back next month.
You got it.
Great.
The next policy on the agenda has been reviewed more recently. This is our 7434 tobacco policy. Yep. Those who have been on the policy committee might remember that it wasn't too long ago that we had an advocacy group work with the district to essentially put in what was considered, I think still considered a sort of a gold standard for prohibiting tobacco on and around CPS, campuses, et cetera. And so that's this policy. You'll see it has been reviewed more recently as of 2018, but I think this will pretty much clear out our 7000 series, and so I wanted to at least put it included in today's meeting. So glad to answer any questions on that.
Any questions? I just have a comment, Ms. Bolton.
Yeah, I think, Mike, this was one of the things that you've put forward and led the fight on. I think that's great. I mean, no fight, but led the advocacy. In the very first sentence, it says how we're responsible for the well-being of students and staff. And later in other policies, and even later, I think in this one, we've been able to add all those other people. I mean, like visitors, stakeholders, partners. It's somewhere. I just wanted to know if, I think we're responsible for all of those people too, if they're coming into our buildings. And I like that other phrase more than I like the students and staff. But I think we had the discussion that we're technically not responsible for anybody but those two. But I think I'm ready to have that little fight again.
What would you recommend it change to?
Well, I'll tell you, wherever we put it in it's in one or two of these policies that Dan has sent us, where it's been that more inclusive phrase. Crap, I can't. It is something about visitors and not mentors, but it's got to be somewhere here. Because I saw it when I was reviewing this, and I'd forgotten all about that. If you want to go on, I can look, or Dan can.
Dan, do you know what Ms. Bolton's referring to by chance?
So in the next policy, I had proposed language, students, parents, staff, and visitors.
Yes, along that's great. Yeah, it's something like that. And it might want partners, or, I mean, because now we've got 20-some school-based health centers. So we got the community learning center stuff. We've got, normally we have mentors and tutors in and out. So it was very inclusive language, and I liked it. And better than just students and staff.
Well, I mean, if you want to add, if the students, parents, staff, and visitors, which Dan, to reference him, he added to 7440. I'm all about that, particularly since our we do want our schools to be used by the community. So, but that would be the addition of parents and visitors, students, parents, staff, and visitors. To that first line of the tobacco policy. Does that sound appropriate?
That's better, yes.
Mr. Lindy, does that seem appropriate to you?
No additions, Mr. Morosky.
Okay. Well, I mean, if that's, do you have anything else on that tobacco one specifically, Ms. Bolton? Before I have a couple things? No? Okay, so I mean, I'm fine, Dan. If you just add that language, we can put this back in front of the full board, if that's okay. Just those two words, staff, visitors. The only thing I want to add is, just so you all know, I have given a number of talks and have sat on numerous panels about this tobacco policy, and am working currently with Butler County and some school districts up there on sort of ways to get to a point where they can have an all-inclusive tobacco policy. And I just think that's something to be proud of. So there you go. Be proud of that. And yeah, Ms. Bolton, that was maybe one of my very, very first things there.
It was.
When I was a baby board member before I got learned. I got learned. Great. All right. Mr. Hoying. 7440.
Yeah, last one this morning is 7440, and I'll share that. A couple of recommendations on this one. This is the policy that relates to CPS plant security and specifically references our surveillance cameras. Let's see. It struck me that we should add some language here relating to video surveillance. In my experience, the sort of impression or belief that people have about school surveillance is once you put one camera in, the sort of assumption is that every part of the campus is observed by surveillance cameras. That's not true at CPS. I'm sure it's not true anywhere. We have cameras, although we have a lot, they are strategically placed in hallways, common areas, stairwells, elevator lobbies, front lobbies, and then some exterior areas of the building, but they certainly don't cover the whole campus. We have a We do not place them in classrooms, and we do obviously locker rooms, bathrooms, or the like. The second sort of misperception, I think, sometimes about surveillance cameras is that if there's a camera up, somebody is always watching. That's also not the case with CPS surveillance. There's no casino pit boss keeping an eye on, all the cameras in real time. Surveillance cameras at CPS are primarily used after the fact. So if there's some kind of an incident, there's an ability to look back at the camera and see who was involved, what was involved, what occurred, etc. There's very little, if any, sort of real-time surveillance going on at CPS. It's the cameras are used after the fact. Finally, the other thing is that surveillance videos don't last forever. So typically ours are recycled within about a 2-week period, some a little bit longer, but that's another sort of misperception of our surveillance. So the updates here are intended to correct some of those misperceptions. Make sure folks know that videos are subject to the Public Records Act in general. However, videos that have student identifying that you can see a face of a student, or that those would be covered by state and federal privacy laws. FERPA prohibits us from sharing those. So again, this is just some updates to that policy. There's also an interesting reference here that it says a reward may be offered for apprehending persons. I'm not sure we've ever offered an award out, or a reward out. Made it seem a little bit like the Wild West, and so I removed that. But glad to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Ms. Bolton?
Sorry. First of all, I really, really like the word choice appropriately instead of adequately. That's a culture change from a remedial district to a district that's trying to be equitable. I love that word choice. I don't ever want to see the word adequate anywhere about us. The other thing is, I wonder if we need to reference alarms or the capacity for some sort of interface with a district staff. I know that electronically, our phone system or whatever I don't even know if it's phones, but I know that our principals and our district leaders can access almost instantly something that's happening at the school. At least that's legend. I think it's true. But I do think the alarm piece needs to be somewhere, because if the kid, let's face it, the real issue is the kids getting in and out of doors that they're not supposed to be using, or bad people doing that. So I just something about this interface security system, and then also the alarm piece.
Sure.
What's scary, everybody, is it was adopted in 2009. When was it last reviewed? Never, not since?
Probably not.
Okay, we're in 2009, we were already talking about the metal detectors.
Yep.
And that's left over from the shooter piece.
Yep. All right. Anything else from board member Lindy?
Nothing here, Mr. Morosky.
Okay. All right, Dan.
Great. We will move those forward.
Great. Excellent.
Thank you. That's all we have this morning.
That is excellent. Thank you all so much. I feel like we got a lot done here. I have one thing for other business. And then Eve, if you have to hop off, that's great. Ben, are you on finance?
No.
Okay.
No, but I think it does pose a tech problem if we're not closing out.
All right. Well, then we're going to make this quick. For other business, do you mind if I just go ahead?
Go ahead.
For other business, I gave an assignment you all may recall about Young Life, which is a sort of a parachurch nonprofit organization that has groups in our school. Obviously, we cannot tell folks they can't be in our schools if they're a parachurch nonprofit, of course. But I did have concern, as you may recall, with them using our name on their websites, and some of their folks actually calling themselves, for example, Aiken Young Life Leader, when we know that this group has engaged in behavior that our own policies say, we don't support. For example, anti-LGBTQ policy. They have their own policies that actually are contrary to our policies. So while I'm not suggesting we kick them out of our schools, I don't know that we can. I am suggesting that we take some action and ask them to remove our schools' names, at least 6 or so that are on their websites saying they're affiliated with us. The other concern I have, and Dan said this, I just wanted Dan to give a quick update to the committee, so I won't belabor this. But another concern I had was the tactics by which they do go to our schools, because any student can join and participate, which is true, but there's tends to be a lack of transparency, i.e. adults volunteering to be coaches in our buildings under the auspice of being a coach, and then roping kids into this Young Life, which again, look, if the kids want to be a part of it, the kids should be a part of it. I have concerns with them using our school's names and people on Facebook saying they are the Aiken Young Life Leader, which is not a real thing that we sanction. So I would just like to ask them to remove our school's names. And Dan, I just wanted to bring it up and give you an opportunity to say, I know we can't kick them out. I'm not saying that, but could we ask them to remove their names?
Yeah, so just to follow up on that assignment, we followed up with some of our high schools who were aware that groups have been at various times active in the past. I don't have a sense that any school had really any activity last year, mostly because of the COVIDs, but probably not in the last couple of years. So among other things, their website may just be inaccurate in terms of we don't actually have groups at some of the schools where they say that we do, and that may be the easiest way for us to say, please remove our schools from your website. It's not actually true that we have groups at all these schools. Okay. In terms of there is an Equal Access Act, which essentially gives students the right to self-organize into groups. It can't be school supported, it can't be employee supported, but that student groups, self-initiated, have the ability to form certain groups on campus. If we're going to allow any groups, if we're going to allow a chess club, then we can't essentially discriminate other groups form it, and that those are student-initiated groups, not staff-initiated groups. So I'm glad to, again, given the assignment, contact Young Life and at least say, we don't believe you do have groups at several of these schools, and with respect to the others, that's inconsistent with sort of the district's mission.
Okay. Mr. Lindy?
This was a thought for you, Mike, because I think this feels like such an important tension between wanting to recognize students' abilities, both because it's the right thing to do and because it's constitutionally required to organize themselves, and also signal what we value as a school district, which is a place where every student, regardless of their sexual identity or orientation, can feel at home. And so one of the things that makes me wonder is instead of trying to limit some of the other, advertising that groups might do, is there a way that we can be more public about what we recently adopted when it comes to the anti-racism policy or our equity policy, and somehow give more visibility to that in some of the same spaces where people might see advertisements for some of these other things? And people may not like that idea, but it might open up some, well, it's not that we can do nothing, there may be a different kind of thing we could do. And I wanted to see what you thought about that.
No, I think that's great. I think it's a both and, though. Again, I'm not going to limit a student's ability to gather and be a part of these groups if they want to at all. But I am going to ask that organizations that are explicitly anti-gay do not use our school's names in advertising. Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, I think Ben's right about the tension, and children students can form their own prayer groups too, and that's great. We don't want to discriminate for that reason. The historical perspective is that I am just a month or so away from being 70, and I will tell you that Young Life began at Aiken High School in the College Hill Presbyterian Church back in like 1968, and so it's been around a long time, and I'm sure it's done great things, and I've had experience with it at Wyoming as well. But I think where it gets most interesting, and this might be the place for Dan to look into. First, Dan, I want you to know if we have anybody at the schools before you talk to anybody, because I don't want I want you to know that we do or don't. But also, where it really comes through is in athletics. And it usually is a coach, and it's the offering of a prayer and whatever that I think many times is great. It's fantastic. But you might want to be talking to the athletic director, because invariably it comes through there. And I'm sure it serves a great purpose. But again, and I'm sure the exclusivity isn't part of it. But having taught in a high school where there was a large Jewish population, too, the whole Christian thing, which is what Young Life is about, we have to be very cognizant of that as well.
Great. I appreciate it. And that's really all that I had then. So Dan, I appreciate you finding out if these groups even exist. So I think that's the logical thing to do, really. So, and I appreciate the history, Ms. Bolton, from you, and then Ben, your suggestion, of course. So do we have a hearing of the public from either of the two people that are here? And then we'll hop off for only 2 minutes.
We have one speaker, our good friend, Fred Lampe. So I will bring him over.
All right, Fred, you got 2 minutes.
Dan, sorry, I invited him earlier because he was told he was a presenter, so that's not actually the case.
Got it. Fred, if you're there and want to say something, you're free to. I actually don't have the ability to bring him over, Rob. I don't know if you do.
Yeah, so he's already been invited because I was told he was a presenter before the meeting started. So
there he is. Fred, if you have a comment, you're more than welcome. Otherwise, that's our only speaker, Mr. Morosky.
Great. Mr. Lampe, are you here, bud?
Signed up. Here I am.
All right.
There you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go for it, Fred.
Yeah, I didn't really sign up to speak. I was just listening, and I guess at this point, since you called on me, I'll appreciate. I do appreciate you speaking to the term of responsible bidder, and making sure that the contracts that are awarded through CPS are going to reputable contractors instead of low road contractors is really the gist of it. So anyway, maybe I'll sign up to speak at the next one, but I appreciate you recognizing me.
Oh, I mean, I recognize you, Fred. It's good to hear your voice, man. And yeah, stay tuned, because next month's meeting, 9 a.m. Okay, the third Thursday, fourth Thursday, whatever Thursday, April 29th, 9 a.m. April 29th, 9 a.m. Fred, we're going to be discussing responsible bidder again. So, without any further business, meeting's adjourned. Have a great meeting, Eve.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.